headlines today. Amhara Regional State holds award ceremony to honor Fano and Amhara militia involved in the ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray. Our reporters caught up with one survivor of First Takaza massacre in western Tigray that saw more than 60 unarmed men killed and their bodies dumped into the river. Hello and welcome to Tigray Television. I'm Erin Imana. We'll be reading the news for you today. Stay tuned. Amhara regional authorities held an award ceremony to honor members of the paramilitary group Fano and other militia. The award ceremony, attended by Abiy Ahmed and his deputy Dammaka Mokonnin, lasted for 2 days and honored militia that apparently killed juntas, a derogatory term often used by Ethiopian authorities to refer to Tigrayans. Sara Kalali has more.
On Wednesday, Amhara Regional State held an award ceremony to celebrate members of the Fano Group, a youth group infamous for committing violent acts against Tigrayans as far back as 2016 and played a leading role in the ethnic cleansing role in western Tigray. The militia were awarded for killing juntas, a derogatory term used by Ethiopian officials to refer to Tigrayans.
Milisha Ato Worko Urdaw Kasamay Shwa በጭብጨባ ሸኙልን። እኚህ 6 ጁንታ በግላቸው በመደምሰስ ታሪክ ክብር ነፃነትን ያወጁ ጀግና ሚሊሻ ናቸው። አመስግኑልን።
A report issued by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch found that the Fano and security forces from Amhara undertook a systematic and deliberate campaign of violence against Tigrayans in western Tigray to right the areas of its majority Tigrayan population.
What if they took a knife and beheaded my daughter? I had to leave. It wasn't safe for me. We've spoken to forensic pathologists that examined photos and videos and observed bodies with gunshot wounds, one body with injuries which suggest chopping with blunt instruments. Also, those involved in the retrieval observed some bodies had their arms tied to their back with electric wires.
Members of Amhara security forces, Amhara militia and Fano were awarded medals and $400 in cash for their part in the war. Awards were also handed out to other parties that had an exceptional participation in the war, like a priest turned soldier from northern Wollo.
አራሽም ተኳሽም ቀዳሽም የፈለቀበት የነገሰበት ኢትዮጵያዊነት ከፍ ያለበት በዚህ ሰዓት እኚህ ቄስ ክፍሌ ይመርም ከሰሜን ወሎ የተገኙ ጀግና ናቸው። አመስግኑልን።
This is Abiy Ahmed's latest demonstration of impunity to international humanitarian law and perhaps another indication of his intent for war on Tigray. Abiy Ahmed has visited 3 military bases in the past, one in the still occupied western Tigray and 2 just a few kilometers from Tigray's borders to the south. But the world has chosen to remain silent as Tigrayans die in droves due to lack of access to vital services and aid.
Ethiopian forces and allies from Eritrea have subjected women and girls in Tigray to rape, gang rape, sexual slavery since the outset of the conflict in November of 2020. Our reporters spoke with the 14-year-old girl kidnapped by Amhara militia and Eritrean troops in western Tigray. The young girl was held for 2 days and raped non-stop by 7 soldiers. The young girl has become doubly victimized as the Ethiopian government continues to block aid and access to medical supplies, making it ever more difficult for the young girl and family to heal from psychological as well as physical wounds caused as a result of these forces' heinous crimes. Saron Tsagay has more.
Hundreds of thousands of women and girls in Tigray have been subjected to rape, gang rape, and sexual slavery by Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea. According to Amnesty International, the rapes were systematic and done with the deliberate intention of humiliating the woman in the Tigrayan identity. We spoke to one survivor of sexual violence. The survivor is just 14 years old. She was an 8th grade student in Humara, western Tigray, before the start of the conflict. She says one day Eritrean forces came to her home along with the Amhara militia, beat her mother, and took her to the woods and gang raped her for 2 days.
While we were sitting at home, Eritrean troops and Amhara militiamen came barging in. They started abusing and shooting at my mother. After they beat her unconscious, they took me. There were 7 of them. They gang raped me for 2 days. After 2 agonizing days, they finally let me go.
Weeks later, the survivor says she realized she was pregnant. As soon as she found out, she says she went to the hospital to terminate the pregnancy, but doctors said it was too risky because they simply didn't have the medical equipment needed. She says she decided to take the risk anyways.
They told me it was risky because they didn't have the necessary medical equipment to perform the medical procedure. I told them to terminate the pregnancy, even if it means I died during the procedure, because I myself am a child. I simply cannot raise another.
The survivor says that while her physical wounds may have healed, the mental trauma will likely stay with her.
Every time I see men in uniform, I'm terrified. I used to be happy, but now I feel depressed all the time. Sometimes, I don't think my mind is working right.
My daughter used to be cheerful, but now she's quiet. She prefers to be alone. She doesn't like it when people get close to her. She is in so much pain.
Her mother is also still suffering from physical wounds sustained when the soldiers came to their home that fateful night.
I was beaten to unconsciousness. They only left because they thought I was dead. After that, they took my daughter to the wilderness. They raped her for 2 consecutive days and dumped her.
I suffer from backbone fracture. Most of the time, I'm in agonizing pain. Even if I try to live with my pain, my daughter's condition and my wife's health keeps me up all night.
The blockade on aid and medical supplies has affected survivors more than most, as they're not able to access the support and care that is needed. And for many sheltered in IDP camps across Tigray, even food is in short supply.
We are ill. On top of that, we are starving. We are distressed, and the world needs to put an end to our suffering.
Thousands of women and girls across Tigray sexually assaulted by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces share the same fate. Survivors of assault, double victimized by a deliberate and systematic blockade that has denied them access to medical care.
The Takaza River massacre that saw the killings of more than 60 Tigrayan civilians near the Takaza Bridge, while far from being the most gruesome atrocity to be committed in Western Tigray, has been the most highly reported. Our reporters were able to track down one survivor. He says Fano and Eritrean forces rounded up dozens of Tigrayans from an internment camp in Kafta Humera, only to take them to Takaza Bridge and execute them. Fani Lemiru has the report.
For months after the breakout of conflict in Tigray, Fano and soldiers from Eritrea would murder young Tigrayan men and dump their bodies into the Takaza River. One of the methods used to terrorize Tigrayan living in western Tigray, forcing them to abandon their homes for a life in overcrowded IDP camps with no food or water, far, far away from home. Birhane Gabriel was a resident of Kafta Humera at the outbreak of conflict in November of 2020. He had been one of many arbitrarily detained by Amhara forces in Humera. When the Fano came on the night of January 17 in 2021 and rounded him up with dozens of other Tigrayan men and took them to the banks of the Takaza River.
It was on a Sunday. They rounded us up and took us to the Takaza River. They lined us up on the bridge, told us to hold each other's hand and walk forward, and then started shooting at us for the back. Everyone fell to the ground.
He says the soldiers would shout ethnic slurs as they shot at them, while he could overhear the voices of their commanders telling them to shoot and kill. Birhane says more than 60 Tigrayan men lost their lives that day, one of the few left to tell the sad tale of what had unfolded on that sad day.
I wasn't injured during the first round, but then their commanders told them to shoot again because Tigrayans don't die easily. That's when they got me. They hit me in the back, then again on my thighs. They broke my bones.
Birhane says the soldier left soon after, at which point he had started to call out for survivors, hoping to learn that he wasn't the only one left.
I screamed, "Is anyone alive?" Then a man answered back and said, "Ari Birhane, it's me Kimfa." I asked if he was injured and he said yes and explained that he was wounded on his arm and his face. I told him he should leave since they didn't get his leg, so he did.
Birhane says that the soldier, far from attempting to destroy evidence of their crimes, had decided that bodies would not be buried.
I heard them shouting, "Don't bury them, let them be." I started moving close to the bodies. I just lied there and wished I was one of them.
The Takaza River massacre is just one of the dozens of atrocities committed to terrorize Tigrayans into leaving their homes in western Tigray, leaving more than 1 million Tigrayan homeless and desperate for basic necessities as the Ethiopian government continues to block aid and other essentials.
Children have been one of the most highly affected by the war on Tigray and the siege that followed. It has resulted in discontinuation of education and the near-complete collapse of Tigray's health system. Our reporter Winta Kidana visited Sawakare IDP camp in Ma'ala and met a young boy by the name of Daniel Desta. Daniel is just one of the hundreds of thousands of children displaced from western Tigray at the brink of starvation and death as the Ethiopian government maintains its blockade on aid.
The war has been even more devastating for the most vulnerable members of the community, especially children. Daniel Desta is 13 years old. He lived in western Tigray until about 9 months ago, when the violence on Tigrayans living in the area had become so unbearable that him and his family decided to leave.
I came from Wari in Tsagade. I came here some 9 months ago. The Fano and Eritrean soldiers chased us out. We first went to Shura and stayed there for about a week and then left to come here to Maqala.
Daniel says the journey to Maqala was grueling. He says he witnessed unspeakable atrocities against civilian Tigrayans, horrors he won't soon forget.
As we reached Takatasfai, Eritrean soldiers just started killing civilians. They were so angry and firing non-stop. So we went back to where we were and started to travel again some days later.
Daniel is now living with his father in the IDP camp after his mother passed away earlier in the conflict. He says he misses school and wished he could continue his education.
My mother died after my brother left home, but my father is still alive. I used to go to school. I was a 4th grader before I came here, but there's no school here. I get tutoring here, but it's just a way of killing time, really.
Like all IDPs, Daniel and his father are not able to access food and medication, but he says he still is grateful.
Life here is better than where I was because at least here there are no Eritrean soldiers. But there's no food, water, or medication here. Our houses are made out of plastic that are ripped easily. We don't have good clothes, so it's hard to live in them.
Although Daniel has not been able to attend education for more than 2 years, he is hopeful that he can soon get back to his education and fulfill his dreams of being a teacher.
Continuation of basic services such as banking and electricity, transportation, and communication by the Ethiopian government has devastated each household in Tigray. Our reporters visited the home of Daniel Gittet, a resident of Ma'ala who has been forced to sell his belongings to cope with the grave impacts of the siege. Aragayu Garumkail has more.
Daniel Gittet is a father of 2 and a resident of Maqala. Before the war broke out in Tigray in November 2020, Daniel used to work as a construction manager and support his family. Following the war and the 10 months long siege that discontinued basic services, however, Daniel and his family have been exposed to life-threatening starvation.
The ongoing siege has caused a lot of problems to the people of Tigray in general. Personally, my life has been lowered to 0 level. I used to support myself and my family as well. But currently, I'm depending on others to survive as I'm not able to provide for myself and my family.
Daniel also says that he has been forced to send one of his daughters to his parents, for he has nothing to offer for his family.
I have 2 daughters. The eldest is 17 while the youngest is 11. I have been forced to send my youngest daughter to my parents as there is nothing to eat or drink at home. We were able to survive so far with the charity we got from others. However, the charity by itself is drying out as everyone in Tigray is facing hardships due to the ongoing siege.
Daniel states that he has started selling his personal belongings to cope up with the problems the siege has put him through.
I depend on others to survive, but as I'm not able to lead my life from the support of others, I'm forced to sell my belongings. So far, I've sold my bed, my sofa, and the jewelries of my wife, which is the worst of all to me.
Despite there being more than 6.5 million people in dire need of emergency food assistance in Tigray, and despite the declaration of a humanitarian truce, Abiy Ahmed's government is seen preparing for yet another disastrous chapter of the war, while maintaining the blockade on all essentials.
Indiscriminate shelling of cities and towns in Tigray was one of the gruesome features of the ongoing conflict. The indiscriminate shelling cost dozens of civilians their lives and injured scores more. We spoke to one father that lost his daughter just a day after her wedding as a result of these gruesome attacks on Tigrayan civilians. Kibrom Al-Dabrhan has the report.
Bahara Taghla is a resident of Humara town in western Tigray. He lost his daughter-in-law just one day after she got married to his son. He says that the incident occurred when the invaders fired artillery on the tent the wedding was held. As a result, his daughter-in-law was killed, and the wedding ceremony turned into a mourning house.
The bride was killed by a heavy artillery that was thrown from Eritrea at around 5:30 in the afternoon, and my other daughter-in-law was also stricken. She hasn't recovered yet. She is still at a hospital seeking medical attention. 6 other people were killed on this horrific incident as well.
Bahara, who is a 78-year-old man, says that he used to live with his extended family and had a good life. He used to own a large farmland in Humara on which he earns his living. But now he's in desperate situation because all his property was looted and forced to leave his residence behind and sheltered at an IDP camp in Dedabit.
I had a good life back at home. I was an investor and had a tractor. I've lost properties like refrigerator, credenza, and a bait that are estimated to be 300,000 birr, and 19 bagait breed ship, which are estimated to be 450,000 birr, and also 25 quintals of sorghum that cost 50,000 birr, 3 quintals of sesame that cost 21,000 birr. I have also lost an estimate of 100 quintals of sorghum that was not harvested.
Bahar is also a survivor of a drone attack that was bombed on the Dedabit camp where he is sheltering.
A drone was sent to bomb IDPs while they were asleep. Many families were burnt in their shelter.
The blockade on medical supplies has led to many people losing their lives by easily treatable illnesses. Sultan Siyum was diagnosed with palatine cancer but has not been able to access adequate care due to the Ethiopian government's siege on Tigray. Our reporter Salome Tigrai has more.
The Ethiopian government's 10-month-long blockade on medical supplies to Tigray has left many desperate, including Sultan Siyum, a resident of Maqala, diagnosed with palatine cancer. Hiwot Kahsai, Sultan's wife, says her husband has not been able to eat or breathe on his own for some time now, a condition wholly preventable if he had received treatment in time.
He can't breathe on his own, so he needs help breathing. He cannot eat as well. We feed him with the support of a syringe. He's in such a terrible condition. He would have been better had he found the right treatment and medication.
Dr. Kibrom Hilluf, an oncologist at Ida Referral Hospital, says Sultan was supposed to travel abroad for treatment, but was unable to do so because of the blockade.
Sultan has palatine cancer. He needs to go abroad for radiation treatment. The blockade happened just as he was about to leave. He's here, but he's not receiving any treatment, and he's getting sicker every day.
Hiwot says the blockade on banking services that has denied her and her husband of access to their savings has been just as devastating, making it impossible for them to afford much-needed care for her husband.
The medication he needs is either unavailable or so expensive. We have to spend 5,000 to 6,000 birr a week for just 30 minutes worth of treatment. The world has to open its eyes. It may be too late for us, but there are many others that could lose their lives if they don't receive treatment soon. The world should be there for them. This is really terrible.
It's been months since the World Health Organization announced that close to 4 million people in Tigray urgently need medical assistance. But the world has chosen to remain silent as Sultan and many more find themselves in desperate need of medical supplies.
That concludes our news for the hour. I'm Mer from Mala Tigray. Thanks for tuning in.